Afternoon, everybody. Darlene McLennan here. Thank you for joining us today. It's fantastic to have everybody online. It's been a really great response. Firstly, I'd just like to begin by acknowledging our traditional owners of the lands on all that we meet today, and I'd like to pay respects to their elders past and present. Before we start this webinar, I just wanted to let you know that it is being live captioned by Reporter Inc. and the webinar will be recorded and placed on ADCET after this event. For those who have joined us for the first time, the ADCET website is www.adcet, which is adcet.edu.au. Unfortunately, the GoToWebinar platform isn't as accessible as we would like. For those who are joining us and using a screen reader, it is difficult to ask questions in the chat pods, and we're trying to have an interactive event today. So if you do have any questions, you can email us at ADCET, which is adcet.admin.utas.edu. We'll also be doing a poll, which is a really wonderful way to interact, but when the poll is on, we will not be able to have the captions. We won't be talking during that time, but David will explain it a little bit more. If you are experiencing any lag, we have got our webcams on today because we wanted to make it as interactive, but feel free to close off any of those, any of the videos, because it's more your end if you're getting lag more than our end. So feel free to close off, close off mine, because really you don't want to see me today. Anyway, and you have all been muted so that we get as little background interference as possible, but throughout the presentation there is a question pod. Please feel free to put your questions in there and we will ask it to the presenters. So this webinar is being facilitated by ADCET, but also the NDCO program. So it's great. One of the key aims of the NDCO program is to improve the graduate outcomes of students with disability in further education, after further education, and I think this is a hot topic for us because of the graduate outcomes are a lot less for people with disability. So with that, I'm going to hand over to David Swain, the NDCO for Queensland, to talk about a little bit of an overview and also the numbers. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Darlene. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
We can. Hi, everybody. So we've got a little bit of a cross-section of folks on the webinar today. I'll just pop this webcam on for you too so you can see me. There we are. Hello, everybody. So we've got a little bit of a cross-section of people on the webinar today covering careers staff, equity staff, folks from DES providers, we've got students. So what we've done is we've given a little bit of an overview in the beginning of this to make sure that everybody has access to the same information about what we're talking about. So on the slide we have a few descriptions of some student profiles which some of the trial USEP consultants have worked with to give you a little bit of an idea about the depth of who a graduate with disability is. And in general numbers, there's 63,717% of students with disability in higher education, and the numbers are increasing, and at a reasonable growth rate. If you look at 6.9% as a growth rate, it's quite a strong group. And we're here today to discuss what we can do to make sure that this particular group of individuals has access to employment on the same basis as their peers. Some of these are case studies about what's available in the way of support in university. So an example would be a student with dyslexia who graduated and is working in the biosciences field. What we've discovered is that the individual is still wanting some coaching and support to self-advocate, and that's after leaving university and getting into work. So some of the discussions might be about post-university supports as well today, which will be exciting. Another example would be a student with dwarfism studying nursing, a student with agoraphobia studying HR, a student with post-traumatic stress disorder studying in a business degree, and a student that I'm familiar with, a student with fibromyalgia studying law. This individual really wanted an additional and separate placement due to having a series of impacts throughout their study not being able to get through some practical components. And that particular experience has helped to put that career back on the right trajectory. So as you can see, it's a very broad variety of folks, and everybody's story is different. Darlene, you're driving. Can you go to the next slide for me, please? There we go. So in terms of what we've done is we've broken it down using the quilt data, and we're only talking about overall employment here. And the reason that we would use overall employment to have a look at how each group is performing in the way of employment outcomes is because it negates the argument of part-time and full-time work. So overall employment, while it's a little bit more general in terms, it's an easier way of having a look at how groups as an entirety are performing regardless of the type of work that people get into. And as you can see, students with disability rank at the second lowest in this group of students, with a significant difference between students who don't identify as having a disability and students who do identify as having a disability in terms of overall employment, which is either part-time or full-time work. So there's some work to do. We'll go to the next slide, please, Darlene. And then this is quite interesting stuff. So even, so there's a couple of points here. The first one, undergraduates who report a disability report that they're less likely to use their education compared to students who do not report having a disability. And then students with disability are more likely to engage in further full-time study. And so the logic might dictate that if you engage in further full-time study, it might increase your employability. However, the data for postgraduate coursework students still indicates a significant gap between students with disability and students without. So even if you embark upon further study, it does not, statistically speaking, improve your employability, which is quite interesting. And then finally, there's a gap in the full-time salaries. So graduates with disabilities, median full-time salaries are $5,800 less than graduates without disability. So all of this has come from the QUILT survey, the Graduate Outcomes Survey, and it's available on the QUILT website administered by the Social Research Centre. Next, please, Darlene. And then finally, one of the really interesting conversations, and I'm hoping we get to get into the chat about it today, is what we might call disclosure or sharing information about disabilities with employers. One of my favourite readings on this is the student openness research put together by Helen Cook, who runs MyPlus in the UK. And they surveyed more than, 1,041 students, so more than 1,000 students were surveyed, and asked a bunch of questions about, would you tell an employer, and if you would, what would you tell them, and why wouldn't you, and what would encourage you to tell the employer about your disability, if anything? And they're really strong responses. So 81% of the students said that they would be more likely to inform an employer about their disability if they had been told that the employer was disability confident. So if a careers practitioner might have a discussion with a student and say, hey, look, I know that this employer is really good and disability confident, you should be very confident in providing that information on an application. 70% said the most important factor that would encourage openness is knowing what the benefits are. So if I provide this information, what do I get for that? What happens with it? 77% said the greatest concern about being open with employers during the recruitment process was, of course, being discriminated against, which is a very real concern. And I went and found this little paper, and you can read it at your leisure later. But some researchers did some work on resumes, and they sent out resumes. One resume disclosed disability, and they disclosed various types of disability, and another didn't. And what they found was that if you do disclose on the numbers, you're less likely to receive a job interview. And they also found that the people assessing the applications actually ranked the various types of disability in a certain order quite reliably. And if you disclosed having a mental health condition, you were the least likely to get an interview. So it's really interesting reading.
That's interesting.
Okay. Next, please, Darlene. So the preamble, I'm hoping that some of the higher ed folks didn't fall asleep at the keyboards, because some of this data you already know and some of this research you already know. But for those who are interested in making a difference in this field, we thought we'd give you a little bit of information. And now I'm hoping we can get into the chat. So Darlene, if you would be so kind, I'll hand back to you to introduce our wonderful panellists. And thank you from me as well for taking the time and out of your day. I know that you've got day jobs, and I'm glad that you're here, so thanks.
No, thank you so much for our panellists. It's fantastic. It's great to see you all, and it's been wonderful to work with you this week, pulling this all together. So today we're really fortunate to have four great people join us today. So we've got Sam Flood here, who, well there, he's in Melbourne today. He's left his job this afternoon, and he does assure me that there is a chemist there handing out the drugs for people in Melbourne, so it's all okay. So I've known Sam for a number of years now. I've been really fortunate to meet him in his final year of school, and have kind of followed with interest Sam's journey through further education, but then also was a part of that journey with Sam's frustration of trying to find an internship after he graduated from his study in pharmacy at the University of Tasmania. So it's going to be great to hear a little bit more from Sam. So thank you, Sam.
Thanks for having me.
Great. We also have Natalie Searson from Mylestones Employment. Natalie is a job development officer with a huge amount of experience, and the thing that stands out for me with Natalie, it's terrible, but she's a Tasmanian as well, so you've got a few Tasmanians online. We're such competent and wonderful people. It's great. And in the room with Natalie is Jeremy Muir. Jeremy works for Griffith. He has two roles. He's currently working on a project with HR at Griffith, looking at assisting the university to attract people with disability to apply for jobs at the university, and how they can best support those individuals in their role. So it's a fantastic project. I'm really looking forward to talking with Jeremy today, but even more so in the future, because I think universities are a big employer, and I think it'd be fantastic if they have more of a proactive approach to employing people with disability. Jeremy is also a disability advisor at Griffith and has many years experience. And finally, but not least, is Kate Carroll, who is from the University of Wollongong. Kate is a careers consultant, and yes, we put out the call on one of our email lists, and Kate kindly put up her hand to be part of this. She's has a lot of expertise, and really value her knowledge as well. So that's our panel, which is fantastic. So now I'm going to head back to you, David, to do the poll.
Thanks, Darlene. And we've got some folks writing in about the captions. Sandy, would you be able to make them large at all? Please and thanks.
Or maybe people mightn't realise that they can actually change the size of their box. If you can actually put your mouse, hover your mouse over the box that the caption
above the PowerPoint.
Yeah, we might just need to wait for her captioning again. You're right, Sandy. If people are if people are having trouble seeing the if people are having trouble seeing the captions, you do have the ability to change the box sizes. You can hover your mouse over between the videos and the caption box, and you should be able to change the size of that box too, which may help people to be able to see it.
Thank you, Darlene. Yes, if you grab that line above the PowerPoint and drag it down, if you can do that, it'll bring all of the video feeds larger, but I'll keep mine off for now. So actually we wanted to, just before we get into some questions, and folks have put through some pre-questions, we wanted to go to a poll. And this is about audience participation, so there's no right or wrong answer. You should be able to select more than one, or you should be able to select other, and I hope it works, but we're going to give it a go. So the poll question is the reasons graduates with disability are not getting work at the same rate as peers without disability are. And for those that are using captions, who have participated in the webinars before where we do polling, the video feeds will drop. I'll only leave the poll on for 30 seconds, and at that time, nobody will say anything, okay? So the poll's going to come up now, and we'll just see what comes back. Okay. And we're back. So for those playing along at home, I'll read out the results. We'll share the results. So the reasons graduates with disability are not getting work at the same rate as peers are 67% employers do not have equitable recruitment pathways, 73% employers have a low expectation of people with disabilities, 53% students aren't confident disclosing disability, and 33% students lack work experience comparable to students without disability. So that's a very broad cross-section, and we did pick a few answers which are quite likely semi-accurate at the very least. So we're looking at a number of issues, I suppose, one about employers, one about employer expectations of people with disability, one about students and confidence in disclosure and how to handle that conversation, and then one about students lacking work experience. Okay, well, I think that we might launch into some questions if we can. And we had some questions come through in the beginning, and we might go into those, Sam, with yourself first. One of the questions was, what were the main barriers or stumbling blocks that you came across when looking for a graduate role?
So it's been a little while since I was in that position, so I have been thinking about it a little bit. I think for me, it's difficult to pin down, but I would say, yeah, employer and potential employer attitudes was a hurdle for me. Also being in Tasmania, there possibly weren't as many job opportunities as there was on the mainland in my field, or in any field really. So that limited it to start with, but also, yeah, talking to potential employers and trying to get through to them that having, well, in my case, a physical disability is not a big issue, was difficult to get across. I found that if you could actually get a conversation and a discussion going, that was a good thing. But a lot of people would be just initially dismissive, not interested. Of course, they'd spin it in a way that was acceptable, I guess. I'm trying to think of how to put it, but yeah, maybe we're not interested in an intern this year, don't have space, don't have the budget for one, blah, blah, blah. Whereas, yeah, other people slotted right into places quite quickly. But, yeah.
No, fair enough. And was there anyone that actually asked the practical questions? Like, how do you do this? How does it work for you?
Yeah, some people did, which was great. Somehow none of those opportunities still ended up panning out for whatever reasons. But I did feel, yeah, more confident if someone was willing to have that conversation, which I think is a really good place to start, because anyone with a disability has been spending their life adapting to changing environments, making sure they can work in any environment, doing anything. So translating that to a workplace is second nature. So just it's a matter of making a potential employer understand that as well. So anyone who's willing to have that conversation, yeah, great. But not so many people are.
And I suppose while we're on the topic of Sam, how is work going, by the way?
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks. Yeah, work with a lot of really great people. I'm a bit over 2/3 through my internship at the moment, so I started to think about next year, hoping I don't end up in a similar position again. But yeah.
Oh, well, time's flown, hasn't it? That's good. That's fantastic.
Quite daunting.
I've another question for you, and I suppose it does tie into a conversation we just sort of had. But have you ever experienced discrimination when applying for a job? One person wrote in, "I have a high GPA, and I worry that others will get chosen over me." And I'm assuming they mean if they disclose a disability on an application. What did you do?
So I changed tax a couple of times. Initially, so on an application, so an application that was open to anyone, I wouldn't disclose my disability because at the time, well, it's not really, but at the time I was very adamant that it was not relevant to the position. And it still isn't, but people like to have a bit of a heads up, I've found, which, yeah, can be good or bad. It's difficult to get through to someone in an email or an application saying you've got a disability because they'll just see the word and go, done. Whereas if you are meeting someone in person, you can literally show them what you're capable of. So yeah, after a while, I did start putting my disability in applications, just so people would have a heads up, and I figured the more genuine people would have the time to have the conversation. At the same time, there's potential that did kind of scare a lot of people off.
Yeah.
I guess.
I mean, research supports it.
Sorry?
Research supports it, as we had a little chat before, that there is a risk that if you provide that information on an application, then you may get less chances of interviews. But you did receive a bunch of interviews, as I understand.
I had several interviews over the course of my job hunting. After Darlene and I released the Find Salmon internship video with USEP, there was definitely a lot of renewed interest and discussion, and from that I had 3 very solid job offers within about a week or 2 in very different places, very different pharmacies. So that was kind of a real when it rains it pours, and I had some big decisions to make very quickly, but I'm really happy with where I've ended up. I do absolutely appreciate everyone who was genuine in that time, but I've landed somewhere I'm really happy in. Yeah.
No, it worked out fine. But I find it a little bit difficult that it had to result in us, I guess, recording a video, and that's really. I mean, I know it sounds a little bit.
I can't complain because I've ended up somewhere I'm really happy. But he's like, you know, it's such a bad year.
The end result's good.
Maybe not so great, but character building, I guess.
Well, thanks. Thanks, Sam. So there were 2 specific questions for you that came through in the early questions that people could put through on the way in. One of the things that we invite people to do as time goes on, if something pops into your mind that you'd like to know from any of the panellists, please just put it in the questions box and we'll sift through those after we get through the pre-questions. Okay, so this is a bit of a generalist question, I suppose, and someone jumped forward. It's broad. Do you think it would be easier to find a job with practical on-the-job training rather than going through a degree or qualification? There's a lot of layers to that.
Good. John, can I go first?
Yes.
From my point of view, when I was job hunting, it turned into a more of a who you know rather than what you know. So if in my position, we had a lot of work placements throughout uni. So a lot of people would find potential internships through their 3rd and 4th year placements, because you literally could be in a workplace showing the potential employer what you're capable of and that you are a good worker, blah, blah, blah. And that would be a good place to start. You might get an offer out of it that way, whereas cold calling places is a little bit more difficult because they don't know you or what you're like as a potential employee. So I would think from that point of view, I would have found it, kind of found it easy to find places. Like I did chase up everywhere. I had work placements in my university degree, none of who were in a position to take me at the time, but I felt more comfortable kind of going after people who had already seen me work and what I was capable of, rather than trying to find someone who had no idea who I was or what I was about and would dismiss me as soon as they could, kind of thing.
And I suppose you did a degree as well that has mandatory practical components, which would have been helpful to demonstrate the type of work you can do as well. I suppose that question's quite broad, isn't it? It's very hard to answer because it depends on what degree, it depends on what's in it. But for yourself, I'm assuming you're saying that the practical components were indeed helpful.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Does anyone else have anything to add to that about study versus just trying to get down the path of a post-school job?
Yes, it's Natalie speaking. I think from my perspective, it's very hard to answer. I guess my experience in the last 12 months, I've experienced students or graduates who have not had a work placement. So there's no, the course doesn't have it in the structure that you have a work placement at all. So some of the students that I've been working with haven't had that work placement experience at all. So in effect, as you said, Sam, it's like cold calling employers for students. Yep.
Natalie, that's a really good point, because some of the, some of those questionnaires that many of the students you work with would fill out, the anonymous questionnaires. Almost half are saying that, and this is university students in their final year who are living with a disability, almost half are saying that they do not have degree-related work experience. Is that something that you focus on when you first start working with your students?
Absolutely, yes, I do. I need to have a holistic view of where they've come from, where they're at now, and what resources they've tapped into as well.
Yep. Okay. Okay. Which one next? This one's a question for you, Natalie. I suppose it's a really easy answer in a way, but perhaps we could talk about what's different. The question is, in the past, how much time, this is obviously prior to doing the work that you do, was spent on campus, and in what regularity from a DES provider perspective?
Okay, so given that I've been facilitating the program for over 12 months, initially I co-located 1 day a week at the Gold Coast campus, Griffith University. However, it was apparent that students were identifying from not just the Gold Coast, it was everywhere. Obviously Griffith has several campuses. So 12 months on, I now co-locate twice a week. So Wednesdays I co-locate at Nathan campus in Jeremy's office. And so it's twice a week. I guess from my perspective, yeah, twice a week. It could be more. There's a lot to do in this space.
Yeah, no doubt. No, thanks, Natalie. I think that was someone from the DES perspective wondering about what type of difference it's made being in the environment, the university environment, doing the work that you do. I'm assuming that's what they meant. Has it been beneficial to get to know the staff and get to know the students and how the uni system works?
Sure, absolutely, and I'm still learning. And I guess from my perspective, the campuses are diverse, and I'm still getting to know people even today. But definitely it's been a great learning curve, and I have more of an understanding of what careers potentially are available to students in specific degrees, and what is available for students actually in that space. So it's become a bit of a cross-reference, I guess, as well. I've had students who've not actually tapped into any of the resources at Griffith.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're able to send them back to the Careers Centre, say, for example, for the sessions available. Yep, that makes sense. Thanks, Natalie. Sam, this one's a specific question for yourself.
Sorry, before that happens, sorry, David, we don't get to have control over people's video camera, worse luck. So if people can kind of start their own camera and close their own camera when they start to talk. Sorry, it's a bit of a pain. Thanks, Sam.
I'm going to leave mine off permanently, or I'll forget each time.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Sam, were you aware of funding that was available for support, say for example like job access with modifying workplaces, or either a DES provider after university or post-school? Did you talk to employers about this as a way of helping to solve anything that you needed in the workplace? So the questions are two-pronged, I guess. One, did you know that the funding was available to modify workplaces if needed? And two, were you confident and comfortable to have that conversation with an employer?
Yeah, so I definitely was aware of funding for any workplace modifications and that kind of thing. And I think as time went on, I was more forward about bringing that up with any potential employers. To start with, it wasn't really something that was at the front of my mind, but yeah, as time went on, I'd always mention it, especially if I could see they were having any kind of reservations about it. I, as much as I could, try to be upfront about what I was physically capable of, which is I can still do 80%, 90% of what a pharmacist does anyway, but for that other 10%, I would always bring up that, yeah, if there was anything that needed to be changed, the employer would not be paying for that, or would be funded for separately. If that was any kind of swaying for them to make a decision. Whether that worked, well, it didn't work, I think, on a lot of people, but yeah, I'd try and
You did know.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think the question was probably more about how did you find out about that, just out of curiosity?
So it would have been through university, through, Darling, I guess, through the disability advisors and careers advisors. I had been involved with disability employment services previously, looking for work before I went to university, so I was familiar with the system. Yeah, it was always kind of in the back of my mind.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in there as well. I've seen quite a few students who actually don't understand what reasonable adjustment is in the workplace because they've been here at university for 3 or 4 years. They're used to the reasonable adjustment as a student, and so they are not aware of how that's going to, I guess, transcend into the workplace. So working with a local DES provider as well, and cross-pollinating in terms of our knowledge and how we can support students, I think that that's really important, not only for career practitioners and how to learn about the workplace environment, what the DES providers do, but also how we can support students in terms of finding what their skills are and how they can transfer them. I think it's really important to provide them with information and knowledge and resources about that practical sense as well.
That's great, Kate, and a good point as well about making sure that everybody has the same access to the information. The situation might be that there's a student out there who, with that information, would get a job. So it would be a travesty if they do not have access to what's out there for them to support them into work. That's good. I wonder how we can be more consistent on that across the country as well. This one's for everybody, and it's a parent. So for those listening in, I'd just like to let you know we've now moved on to the questions that are coming through in the question box. So if you've got something, feel free to type it in, and if I can wind it into the conversation, I will most certainly do that for you. And this one's probably something that's on a lot of parents' minds, so I'll read the question in its entirety. I'm a parent of a young man on the autism spectrum studying robotic engineering. He can program a robotic arm and do other such tasks, but is unable to negotiate the recruiting and interview process for an internship. He doesn't know how to search, ask, search, communicate with the employer. How much should I do for him? And doesn't it look bad if your mother is doing it for you? How do I negotiate this with him respectfully? That's open to anybody who'd like to talk through and thinking about the interview process as well.
I think there has to be some level of input, and that's where the ADCET consultant comes in getting to know the student and going through those stages of the mock interview and those sort of processes to gain an understanding of what would be the best process and approach for employers. Pardon me.
Thanks, Natalie. Also consider the option that the interview is not the best option for the individual. And I know that it's not everywhere, but there are organisations that work on supporting organisations to have recruitment processes which are appropriate for people on the autism spectrum, which means in most cases, or in some cases, making sure that the intake doesn't include a social test. So a job interview is a conversation. It's a test of your social capacity in many ways, and in a number of ways it doesn't really test that you can do the work. Kate, you had a thought, I think?
Yeah, I do. Look, I would suggest reaching out to the careers consultants at the universities themselves. I'm in the process at the moment of supporting a student in finding an internship and being the conduit between the employer and also the student. So figuring out what's the best approach, maybe it's me approaching the employer first and having an initial interview with them, or maybe it's going in with the student and notifying the employer as well that I'll be there in terms of, you know, a support network. So I think having that additional support from somebody within the university would be really beneficial for you.
So just to add to that, Kate, I also had a young student who I approached an employer and disclosed, and it was arranged that the interview was not going to be a formal face-to-face. It was going to be a problem to solve, for example, in that space. So that was successful, and the student went on to do a placement there with that employer.
It's quite interesting, Natalie, and how interesting, in fact, that if you can talk to the employer about what do you want someone that can do the work, or would you like someone that can sit through a conversation and impress you socially? I mean, it's sort of, it sounds quite straightforward, but I suppose if you help people to see things from a different angle, perhaps they'll be more inclusive in their hiring processes. Jeremy, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on recruitment processes, considering it's something that you're looking at the moment.
So we've identified here at Griffith that the way that we encourage people with disabilities to apply for jobs here is not at the level that it probably could be, and then so that's something that we're hoping to improve. But then also, if we've got staff with disabilities in the system already or joining the system, then how do we make sure we support them? So Kate mentioned before about reasonable adjustment. So if you went and talked to our average staff member here in a faculty, very few of them have an understanding about what reasonable adjustment would mean in the workplace for the staff that they're supporting or staff with disabilities. So that level of education needs to happen, but also we need to do better in that in relation to our policy and procedures, which is what we're working on. And if we talk about being an employer of choice, then we want to make sure that people with disabilities want to apply for Griffith, whether they're graduates of Griffith or anywhere, then that they feel confident in disclosing their disability. But currently, there's nothing that we have in our system that would say that yep, great, disclose your disability and then you'll be supported through the whole process. It doesn't say that anywhere, or it doesn't give that encouragement anywhere. So the project is called the life cycle of a staff member with a disability. So we're looking from that, into the university, and then if they transition out.
That's a really valid point. I think it's something I had a discussion recently with somebody about. Most intakes have a very specific one-liner about encouraging people to apply, people with disability, but they don't actually very carefully say this is the process and what will happen with the information you provide. And I think that it's a very good point. So thank you, Jeremy. Okay, we'll pick another question out. Visible and invisible disabilities. Someone's written through, unfortunately, there are many disabilities that are extremely visible and there is no hiding it. So where do you start with that? I suppose on applications, this goes back to what you may write on that application and how to prepare for the interview. So Natalie, perhaps yourself or Kate, visible and invisible disabilities, what kind of conversations are you having in general with students?
Well, I guess in the first instance with all of the students, I think, disclosure, they haven't wanted to disclose regardless of disability. So having in-depth conversations around that is relevant. It's case by case, I guess. Interesting to hear what Sam was saying previously about he tried different methods. From, I guess, my perspective, on written applications, I don't disclose, or the student doesn't disclose on the application. It's not until potentially face-to-face. It's case by case.
And I think for those of us that, you know, are disability advisors, and then you're talking to students, you know, in their last year or so about employment, and that disclosure issue comes up right through someone's degree about what they disclose, who they disclose it to, when they disclose, and there's no different when it comes to employment, I think. I talked to a student this morning that's going on their first nursing placement, and they asked me, should I disclose? And, you know, in that particular person is, we talk about, okay, so why would you disclose? What are the benefits are you disclosing now? Does it have any bearing on you being able to complete the placement or not? Does it have any bearing on the tasks in the placement? So going through all those facts or those around disclosing is for that particular student, for that particular placement, and then moving forward with the rest of their degree and or placements. And it really is a case-by-case basis. You know, as a person who lives with a disability myself, mobility, mine's fairly obvious. But if I apply for a job, I don't disclose in my application. If people read my application, they could probably figure it out, but I don't make it obvious. And if I'm ever afforded an interview, then at that stage, I will do it then. Again, it's who I'm applying, where I'm applying, and it really is a case by case. And I say to the students here, I'm happy to shout it from the rooftops, because, you know, if that's part of who you are, then we shouldn't need to hide it. But unfortunately, that's not the real world.
And it's sort of something that you see over years as well. As there's a researcher, Anjali Pratt, has done some work on disability identity and how much people actually identify in the bracket of as a person with disability. And I think from what I've seen, as people get older, they get much more confident at having that discussion. But for, you know, a young person leaving school, entering university, it's a really tough one.
It is.
Okay. Is there anything that anyone would like to add before we go to the next question? Kate, hi.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, I see a range of students as well, and I totally agree with what the other panellists said. And I think it's having that lack of confidence and going in to disclose a disability with a negative viewpoint that something's going to happen as well. If the student is equipped with the knowledge of their disability and how it can be supported in the workplace, and provide the potential employer with that information to support the employer as well, I think that's a real positive.
I agree. I can probably give you a case in point there as well. I had several discussions with a student regarding disclosing his disability, which was quite complex. However, he believed it would impact on his internship. So after some role plays and some in-depth discussions, really what it came down to when we unpacked it was just having an understanding of what the workplace looked like, how many people, what the office layout was like. That alleviated that anxiety. So in the interview, I suggested to ask if he could do a tour of the office of potentially where he would be having his internship, which he did, and he was successful. And he contacted me the next day and just said it worked really well. And, you know, thanks so much for the support. The questions that we went through, they were exactly what they asked, and they were quite happy to just show him around the office environment, which alleviated that anxiety.
That's quite a natural way of making sure that the person's comfortable and confident by the time they get there as well, Natalie. Good thinking. And actually, this brings us to a point. So that student received some additional and separate support and coaching from yourself. While, of course, one wouldn't take credit for the work, do you think it was helpful to have someone to talk these things through with that knows what might happen?
Absolutely. Yes, for sure.
Okay. We're going to pluck another question through now. Try and change tracks if we can. Jeremy, there's a quick specific one for you. with the direction you're looking to take with Griffith, are you looking at stating that it's a disability-friendly organisation, or what's sort of on the table?
That's kind of what we'd like to say. How we actually say that in the recruitment process. So you mentioned before that usually there's a one line that says, put in organisation encourages people from equity target groups or to apply. We want to increase that to make it a little more specific around, Griffith University would be employer of choice if you have if you live with a disability. Please contact us so we can ensure that your recruitment process, we can put support in place around that recruitment process. Even if the person doesn't perhaps get an interview, or even if they get an interview, we want to make sure that they don't feel that they can be open and honest around their disability, and that we can support that through any stage of the process. And then, so once they go, they don't have to go, oh, maybe I shouldn't say anything. We want, we look at your living with a disability, what added value you can have to our organisation, and that's kind of the message we want to get across.
So a positive
obviously
message.
We're doing that. There's also some other work to happen around the mechanisms within the university and staff within the university about how we promote that as well, to ensure that everybody's on board, because there's no point us saying that through the recruitment process and then they suddenly end up in an area where they get a less than positive reception. Does that make sense?
Yes, and it's actually a really important point, and this is a number of us operate in an equity circle, I suppose I'd call it, and so many people we talk to on a daily basis might be quite disability confident, but if you're in an enormous organisation, you're relying on line managers to know what they're doing as well. So there's a lot of work in that. Okay, so a specific question, and it's for everybody. It came in through email. It's, are any of the panellists aware of internship programs specific for students with disabilities?
Well,
Oh yeah.
Hello.
You're right. Oh look, there's numerous ones out there, and the other guys would probably be stating these as well, but Australian Network on Disabilities, they've got their stepping into programs, so paid internship experience. So that sits outside all of the universities, so it's an external program. We refer lots of students, and lots of students from our university are successful in gaining placement, which is great. The other program from Australian Network on Disabilities, PACE mentoring. So it's not an internship per se, but it's still building those connections within their specific industries that they want to get into. So I would suggest jumping onto the Australian Network on Disability website and having a look at the different programs on offer. We, as I think Rachel was saying before, we have a lot of students who don't have internship opportunity within their degree. So Career Central actually has a independent internship subject that is an elective, and we really encourage students of all equity backgrounds to participate in that because of the level of support that we can offer them as well. Any other paid internships or anything, guys, that you're aware of?
yeah, so there's the Brisbane City Council DOOR program, Disability Action at Work program, which recently they have advertised for applications, and that I believe runs potentially twice a year. So that's a 16-week, 2.5-day a week paid work experience. So what they do is they match the student, the successful student, up to into appropriate area of their study. So for example, if you've studied IT, they may put you in an area where they're doing a special project on Brisbane moving forward to 2021 project that they're working on. So that's the DOOR program. There's also the Grad Access program, which is the federal public service program. So that is quite a good program as well. That is a 12-month internship, paid internship based in Canberra. So applications recently closed for that, and it starts in February. So I believe the public service pay for relocation costs, and you are the student or the graduate spend some time in different areas within the public service, and there's potential after that to, of course, move on into a permanent paid position. There's also a new one that has just recently come out as well, and that's for students who identify with autism, and that's an entry-level program into the ATO, and Specialises Australia is running that in collaboration with the ATO.
Fantastic, folks. Thank you. Look, there is probably more out there that we haven't listed as well. One of the things to consider, though, is the impact of having specialised programs versus working on everyday recruitment to be inclusive. Long discussion. Let's not have it now. There's some specific questions for each panellist, which, because we're running out of time, with your permission, for those who've written in, I'll connect you with them, and then you can talk amongst a long chat a couple of these things, although they're excellent questions. The final question, I guess we really need to finish on this, is so what needs to change to make a difference? I mean, you know, we're trialling a project which has specialist folks working one-on-one and providing that additional support. I don't think it's the only answer. What have we learned? What do we know about what needs to change in Australia to make sure that we're maximising this wonderful talent pool?
I think there's a lot of aspects to it, so it's a lot to cover. Obviously, we've talked about preparing graduates with disabilities to best essentially sell themselves to employers, which is critical, something that I was possibly a little bit behind on. I don't think I did terribly in interviews, but yeah, maybe there was something more I could have done to convince a potential employer. But I think the bigger part of it is changing societal views on people with disabilities, especially employers. And that's not something you can fix overnight. That's going to take a really long time. But things like what we're doing today are good places to get the ball rolling. But it's like that with any societal change. It's going to take a while.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it comes back to that first slide that you put up in the first poll. I would have put 100% across the whole of those four points that you put up. I think it's important to look at it from a holistic perspective. I think we need to encourage employers. We need to work with our students. We need to work with the staff that are surrounded by us and embed equity into everyday practice. So I think it's a really big job, but I think, like you said, doing these types of things is really important, just to get messages out there and try and come up with some form of approach that encompasses everything.
I agree, Kate. I agree totally. It's going to take a long time. However, those conversations need to happen every day, everywhere, to have it as part of our everyday life, in society. They need to make these changes. I think having some media exposure is worthy. I think things are changing, and in the space that I've been the last 16 months, from what I'm seeing, there's been some fantastic changes. We still have a long way to go, but it's about having those conversations, keeping those conversations up.
And it's difficult when you've got, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, that as far as I'm aware, the federal government supposedly has a target for the employment of people with disabilities, but they haven't met that target for a number of years. And also, under the Disability Discrimination Act, when we looked at the employment standards, and I can't remember. I don't ever think they were ratified. They may or may not been, but again, that's if they were, it took years and years and years to do so. So you've got those issues there around that. If you've got federal governments or governments walking at it or, you know, not fully behind it, then it makes it difficult for the private sector to come along as well.
That's true. And so you're talking about leading by example as an important point, Jeremy, I suppose.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Well, look, I mean, there's probably a great deal of discussion that could be had on that one, but we're running out of time. So with that said, there is a lot of questions that have gone unanswered. We would love to answer them. So what we'll do is we'll have a question and on ADCET, which will go through each question that was asked and put an answer in there and send that out to everybody. So I'd like to thank our panellists for your time today. It's been a fantastic conversation. And this is the beginning of connecting people, because one of the things that that I would say what needs to change is that a lot of people are doing a lot of great things. Someone wrote in something I didn't know about, and I think if everybody knew what everybody was doing, everyone would learn a lot faster. So if we can connect as a community, that'd be fantastic. So thanks to everybody, and I hope you've enjoyed today, and we look forward to getting those the rest of those questions answered when we can.